Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Regime, Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're starting, it's picking up 3 weeks after the end of last episode. We've traded... Well, she had already gotten rid of, sprucing the place up, wasn't stressing about mold as much anymore. But now the palace is filled with potatoes because potato steam is rejuvenating her. She's telling her loves how it's so good for loves being her people. She's telling them how wonderful it is and how it's making her feel better. She feels like she has more energy. Obviously, there's different perspectives on the situation because you had people... I believe the character's named Peter. Him and Agnes have different perspectives on the situation, where she feels bad for Herbert Zubak saying like, oh, he's kind of swept up in her madness. Basically, everyone else capitulates to Elena's madness. It's like, no, she's kind of worried that Herbert now is like basically all in on her madness. And even Peter's like, oh, you feel bad for the butcher? And she's like, yeah, I do. It is interesting. She does seem to be the one the most sympathetic towards him, especially in this episode when she found out what he was doing. I mean, we kind of found out he has a long history of like self-harm and apparently didn't know his dad. Kids would beat him up, but then like he would eventually beat them up, but beat them up even worse. A lot of self-harm. In fact, after the Site 5 situation, apparently he tried to kill himself. So you're like, self-harm is kind of something seems like he's dealt with for a good chunk of his life, which is kind of very heartbreaking. And we saw that last episode, like how he beats on his chest and like beats himself up when he's frustrated, disgusted with himself. And it goes to such lengths, he's like I don't know if he's scratching himself or he's just cutting himself with stuff, but Agnes came and like treated his wounds and told him he doesn't need to do that, because basically it was a conversation of, she was even kind of showing concern, saying like, okay, what you're about to do, like the road you're going down is hard, just make sure of the person that's by your side when you go down this route. I thought that was just so interesting. Like, once again, no one else other than Elena, no one else shows him such sympathy. She's kind of not aware. She likes it, but it's like it becomes that thing of how much of it is you only pay attention to the surface because he validates you in a lot of ways. I think Elena does care about him, but maybe it's a thing of maybe she's not looking as deep as she should because that's a side of himself that only Agnes got to see. So I don't know. It's interesting, especially because last episode I was making the whole point of, well, how much is like, no, this is actually how Elena feels versus is Herbert like pushing his own agenda. It's like the melding of minds that's kind of going on between them is unclear. Of her, is it her being influenced by him? Is it him being influenced by her? Like, is it like this symbiotic thing of they're kind of good for each other and bad for each other at the same time? I'm not quite sure. Like I said, just like how much of it is like him legitimately helping her because he believes it's the right thing to do, and how much is it just him pushing his own opinions forward and just kind of inundating her with that, because like he's like pushing her and having her spew up all the bad stuff inside of her, because she's like, oh, why am I throwing up? He's like, that's you getting rid of all the sickness. This place has made you sick. You basically absorbed it all for years, and now you got to get rid of all the bad shit that's in your system. It's like, I mean, it makes you wonder. It's like, well, he has her like eating very like rural remedies, not using Western medicine, kind of going a very, not exactly Eastern medicine, but I mean, maybe relatively to their country, it might be kind of treated as rural/Eastern, but not what would be traditionally considered Eastern medicine, I guess. But, and maybe that's what kind of made her stomach upset. Like, once again, who knows? He has the best of intentions, I want to believe, but it's like, is that really helping her? Is it not? Because we find out with Oscar, which this episode gave me clarity on it, because I was like, the Agnes and... I had so much confusion about the Agnes and Elena of like the whole mom thing. I was like, how's that work? It's like, oh, okay, so biologically speaking, Oscar is Agnes's son because she had him because Elena couldn't have him. So it's like, right, she was a surrogate mother, but she does still love him. It's not like a thing of, oh, I gave birth to you and I have no attention. It's like, no, I care about you. In fact, it seems like she looks after him more than Elena does, because it seems like that's almost this point later on in the episode they showcase he's got like a video game system. It's like a gift, and she's like, "Oh, you'll get to spoil him next time." It's like she gets to kind of. It's almost like being an aunt or an uncle. I can talk about, obviously being an uncle. You get to have fun, chill with the kids without having to take the full weight of being a parent. That responsibility. You get to like dip in and dip out whenever you want to. Type of situation. So it kind of almost feels like Elena's got that relationship, whereas she gets to be the fun mom, whereas Agnes has to be the one that's like, right, take care of him on multiple levels of actually making sure he's getting taken care of. Because at first I was like going on like, because I love they snuck that in there of like this little scene at the beginning of like, okay, here's these pills Peter's giving to Agnes, and it's like, what's that about? And you find out later on it's because they've gotten rid of the more Western medicine approach and are going the more rural approach that Herbert's been kind of distributing around. And it's like, is his medicine actually working? It's unclear because Agnes is giving him more traditional pills and stuff. And it's interesting how she went about. I mean, I guess it makes sense. I guess it's easier to get him to take the medicine, but also disguise it so no one realizes he's taking more traditional medicine by like putting it, like freezing them and making like, well, after crushing them up, putting the powder in some ice trays with some popsicle sticks and making it into like a popsicle treat, so this, I don't know if that's just easier for him to like take it that way, or whether it's just meant to disguise it just to hide it from everyone else, because maybe any other means of taking it would just be too suspicious when you're trying to be very low-key about it. It could be a combination of the two. We actually hear a little bit in this episode about, they don't really get into it too much, but the previous guy that had Herbert's job, like the monitor, like guy checking the moisture and stuff like that position. His name was like Sebastian. We never really heard what happened. We just know like, oh yeah, what was it, like his mouth made like a certain sound when he chewed or ate, and that's why Elena got rid of him or something like that, something small like that. And I don't know if like got rid of means got rid of, or just like he's somewhere, that's unclear. It just seemed like they were talking about it in such hushed whispers that it's like, yeah, we kind of don't want to evoke any of that, so let's not really talk about it out loud. That's kind of like one of those things we just don't talk about it in general. I love at one point when Nicholas and Elena are sitting down to have dinner, and there's that scene with like Herbert talking to her. He's like, oh, she's like, what did we do in your drink? What did we do? And it's like, oh, like they're talking in such an innuendo type of way. And Nicholas is looking almost like, wait, what? And he realized like, oh, you're talking about your dreams, Jesus. But it's just a representation of just like how close the two of them have gotten. And Nicholas obviously feeling like a third wheel in his own marriage, because like, the way Elena lights up around Herbert versus him, even to the point he's like, oh, now that you're feeling better, like, the last time it's been like a year. I'm not trying to pressure or anything, like a year since we had sex. And, she kind of conks out, like, after she laid in bed, because, she's saying what Herbert's doing for her is working. She's feeling more energized and better than ever. Yeah, either way, I'm kind of going on, like, a lot of the individualistic, like, individual segments of the episode, but from a larger macro scale, we're dealing with the aftermath of Elena kind of basically declaring war, saying like, yo, we're not going to let outside countries like the US dictate stuff, the cobalt deal and stuff. And now kind of it's been, like I said, 3 weeks out from all of that, and so it's really pushed to the point that the US sent over a senator, Judith, to kind of be the one to talk to Elena, which Judith's played by Martha Plimpton, which I know I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I know she's from the show Parenthood, but I've seen her most recently in a show made by the creator of Parenthood. Was it called Spree? The show I was thinking of was Sprung. I can't believe I was confusing it with a movie called Spree. This show was called Sprung. It's actually from 2022. Jeez, maybe it crossed over into 2023. But either way, tangents and all that aside, that was kind of like the most recent thing I'd seen her in. So, but she's playing Judith, who's there to try and sway Elena to kind of fall more in line. And obviously there's a lot of people around Elena who are benefiting from it. It's like, well, we need this and that, the cobalt deal. Like everyone is it's like, is it even about the people anymore, or is it more so about lining their own pockets? Like one particular person, Emil, he's the one that had made the whole comparison of basically we're mice in a tub, and it's like it only takes 3 inches of water for us to drown. He's like, I'm not telling you to bend a knee, but just be a little more comparable, and kind of play the game and realize that's kind of how it is. But it's like, once again, he is benefiting from this whole situation. As Elena calls him out later on in the episode, you are the richest person in this country, and you want us to kowtow to that because the U.S. is dictating so much stuff of, oh, you can't do business with China. You should really do this cobalt deal. Oh, it's not that favorable for you, but hey, in the long run, you'll get more direct line to the president. I also, really quickly, I love that Elena went on this whole diatribe when she was talking to Emil about how much of a complaint she had about Judith being the one to show up. First and foremost, I get it. Like, you'd want the president or vice president, someone high, that higher peak of, the U.S.'s position, like, power. You'd want that person to come visit your country to kind of know. But it's like, if you're sending a senator, you kind of feel like, oh, that must mean you're not taking this seriously. You're not taking me seriously. But she kept being like, send a woman, an effing woman. I'm like, why is that an issue? I guess like I could look at, maybe it's like supposed to be like some 4D chess psychological game of them sending a woman is supposed to be just further proof in her mind of like, oh, you don't take this seriously, that you think it's not worth a man's time. Maybe that's the thought process, but it's like having feeling the need to have a woman come talk to another woman rather than, I feel like there is a layer to that you could scrape back and be like, I think I could see the perspective on like the issues, the optics of it. But I don't know if that's just me overreaching, which it most likely could be, and I'm reading way too much into that. But it could just be like Elena's craziness of her as a woman kind of screaming about like, oh, like here's a woman. Why are they saying a woman? So that was interesting. But yeah, the U.S. is kind of basically putting their foot down and just trying to make Elena sway to, once again, to go with the motions of how things are, and they want things a certain way, and it's like, oh, not once again, no China interference, so kind of deal with us but not China. We don't want China to have this foothold. But Elena had kind of mentioned like, yeah, we let you like have CIA operations here, we let you do this, we let you do that, we've let you steamroll over us for so long to kind of amend ourselves to what you need and what benefits you, and we've been so like copacetic with it. But, Judah tried to spin it to be like, yeah, but you've benefited from this relationship as well. But it seems like the U.S. has gotten a lot more out of it in the past and would continue to get more out of it in the future if Elena let things kind of slide. So she kind of just looks to, as Herbert says it later on, it's like, oh yeah, like we talked about it almost like telepathically of like, oh, all I had to do was think about it. It was almost like I sent that message to you. And like the moment he just stands beside Judith and she's like nervous as hell. So they're walking and she keeps turning back and looking at Herbert, and then they separate her from her guard, and then they get her in a room alone with Herbert, and he's scaring her and just kind of like, yeah, like we're not going to have your interference any longer. Scares the living shit out of her to the point she immediately leaves and is like, let's hit the airport. I don't want to go. Didn't want to have to listen to a thing Emil said because he tried to like, oh, I'll talk to Elena. She's like, okay, do whatever you want to. I don't care. Just get me out of here. So that kind of screwed the pooch on that. But like the whole situation was so intoxicating for Elena. It's like, hey, we need to like, oh my god, like we communicated like that, and it's like, what do we do next? It's like we can do that, and he's like, yeah, we can do whatever we want. We can make people like Emil choke on their gold, because that's all they care about, the money and power they'll get from this. So I was like, are you two about to hook up? Because he is severely into her, which we'll get to in a second. But Elena used the hotness of that situation and proceeded to go off and fuck her husband. So. But yeah, because before all of that, Nicholas had met with some of the other, administratives like of her like cabinet of sorts, Mr. Laskin, Singer, and was it the name? I guess that's pronounced maybe Skiff or Schiff. They had gathered in the disco, which I'm like, I don't think he left out to go outside. I think it was, I guess, just a disco in the underneath the palace. Like maybe that's part of the palace, or maybe it looked like he left the room and he was just still in the palace area and they have a little disco club area. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, they were talking about dealing with Herbert. They did some further background on him. Once again, you learn about his dad. We also see his mom, which apparently he beat her up when he was like 14. And even his mom's like, I have no idea why he did that to me. So once again, he's been the very violent person. He's taken steps to be better, but then got him in the military and kind of got worse. And it's just been an ebb and flow. Apparently, he's the one that popped off at the Site 5 situation. He's the reason why 12 processors are dead. He fired the first shot. It wasn't the others. It was specifically him that popped it off. So, and obviously they're communicating amongst themselves like, we need to get rid of this guy because he's dangerous. We need to present this to Elena. But Nicholas is like, I know my wife enough. She's not going to listen to this. In fact, it's just going to drive her even further towards him. So find something better. And so ultimately they, Mr. Laskin ended up kind of blackmailing Agnes, even though she likes Herbert. It's like, oh, he found out about the pill situation. It's like, right, we'll do you that favor of not saying anything, but you can do a slight favor for us, and bugged his room. And we saw like the phone was not hooked up to the cord. I was like, is that him being paranoid of like people listening in? No, it's because he was choking himself with it. I was like, okay. And the way he had it positioned, it was meant to be like behind him, like it was Elena pulling on the phone cord. He's like, oh, whatever you need from me, which is like, it's like, okay, sure, but it's like not enough to be that damning. Despite, I wasn't expecting something that wild and kinky, but it's like, yeah, Nicholas wasn't too like okay with like them trying to use it because it's not enough. Besides, he's like, right, the main thing that matters is my wife's safety and our along with her safety, her happiness. And also, like, she proceeded to rock his world. So he's kind of like, yeah, this guy has made her happy, so we can't really, take that away right now. So it's like you're going about this the wrong way. Rather than trying to gather dirt on him like this, once again, it's going to go back to Nicholas' previous point of you're just going to push him like closer to her. What you need to do is build him up. What Elena enjoys is a story, and once the story kind of gets built up, eventually she'll get bored and turn away, like she has so many other things. It's like, oh, look at the past examples of this and this. We did this for Elena. Eventually, she got tired of it. This, and so like do the same thing here. So they built up a story. Like, I don't know if there's any truth to it, or it's just. I think the point was to concoct a story. So there's like the Foundling, who's like there are 4 very specific people. Well, there's 3 that went around to like spread to different like directions. I don't know if they all started different countries, but there's supposed to be like a 4th secret brother that was kind of a myth, and this person started their country, and they're trying to say there's a direct correlation and genetic correlation and connection between Herbert and this foundling person. So. And that's selling the story of, well, she has some familial connection to Charlemagne. They never able to officially, confirm it, but she's felt it. And now you have this person here, and it's like with him, like you add more validity to everything that you do. And it's just, it was always meant to be. So once again, hyping up this story, telling this massive story. So I guess the point is, having him in this position, either she'll eventually wear thin of it because he becomes the attention and it takes away from her, and that's what they're hoping for, or they're going to believe this up to a certain point, and then they're going to reveal like, oh my god, he lied to us, he manipulated us, we believe this BS. And it's the whole thing of trying to the higher you rise, the harder you fall type of thing, of like putting him on a pedestal so high up that he has no choice but to crash down, and this all kind of no longer becomes an issue. It's what the long of it all is, but I don't know how they plan on making this all fall apart. Unless it is the thing of Elena feels like she's being overshadowed by him, even though she's always been the one stepping forward and him by her side and behind her. Now he's out front and she's kind of behind him. Like, not unless that's the approach they're kind of going forward with this. There's even that picture that looks like him that Agnes puts up, but I'm assuming that's a picture that was commissioned just to sell the story more. I don't know if Elena isn't aware of that, or whether she commissioned that. I don't know. But yes, it's selling that story even more, and especially because she made such an announcement to the people about it. This was like after she ousted a meal in front of like a whole bunch of like reporters and camera crew people, even to the point she chastises him about what he's done to the people, like, oh, like you're ahead of a business and you didn't know all this shady stuff was happening. Well, here's your punishment. You're going to stay here and you're going to clean up. And literally camera crew is following him as he's literally stacking up chairs, you know. But it's like, yeah, if she comes for a meal who's like the richest of them, they even said this disgusting line where they're like, oh yeah, I feel bad for like the 16-year-old somebody from a certain country who's going to have to blow him later. I was like, Jesus Christ. But I guess that's supposed to be the thing of, you know, rich and powerful people and their disgusting proclivities. And, you know, it was just, ugh. But yeah, like the other three are worried about, well, it was more so, I believe, Schiff or Skiff, however you say his name, and Singer. I think they're the ones who are the most worried. I don't know if Laskin was. I don't think he was there at that time. I think he showed up after the fact, but maybe he was just as worried too. I mean, they all three of them, including Nicholas, want him gone too, but for slightly different reasons, you know. So, but I mean, once again, Nicholas has his issues with him, but also enjoys his company because, well, he makes Elena happy, and that makes him happy because she's happy and frisky and yada yada yada, so on and so forth. But also, she's just generally in a better place since he's been here. So, once again, in the long run of it, we'll have to wait to see whether that's all good, whether it's all bad, and how that all translates. I'm very excited to ultimately see where the... really quickly, I was about to wrap things up. This episode kind of played into what I was asking about last episode. I was like, is this episode mainly going to take place in the palace? And it does seem like that is purely the only setting. Obviously, we've gotten other settings, but the show doesn't primarily take place in those other settings. Like, we got someone talking in front of, like, the White House, and that, and then, like, there's the... I think it's still on the palace grounds when they were outside, and they were picking up, what was that vegetable or whatever? It was like a sweet cube or something like that. That whole thing, I think that happened on like the grounds of the palace, so it's not like they went too far, and I don't think Elena would ever stray too far. So it does fit that narrative framing device of like what I was talking about, where it feels very poetic for it just all to take place inside the palace, and it kind of ostracizes her more from the outside world. All you get is the inside perspective, and you hear about the outside world, but you don't directly like interact with it. So we'll see if it keeps up doing that, because like I said, we still just keep the main palace as a main location this episode as well. So we'll see if the rest of the series is like that as well. But yeah, but before I cut myself off, before I was going to say, we'll have to wait to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.